turn into a career, and it's a skill that other people want. Let's go to the next slide. Shows a picture of Thomas Edison. He would probably be autistic today. He dropped out of school. Now, fortunately, he had a mentor, and he had a mentor that taught him how to use a telegraph. It's really important for students to get exposed to things. I was not originally in the cattle industry. I got exposed to it as a teenager. And I had very good teachers and mentors, starting with my mother. When I was very young, she was always pushing me to do new things. She encouraged my ability in art. It's a program today. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide, please. Now, I'm kind of a NASA fan. And I got 5 years ago, I got a chance to go visit this launch pad. This was like so much fun. And what I learned when I went there is the astronauts, they had we call it the right stuff. But they were people that had Tourette syndrome, that were dyslexia. They were building the launch pad. They were designing control rooms. There were people there at NASA, really smart people, that were, some of them probably were on the autism spectrum. I've been to many, many NASA sites over interesting stuff I do. And Voyager spacecraft now is 45 years old. The scientists are in their 80s now. They are still tracking it. They've managed to keep it going. For a long time, they had to work out of a storefront next to a McDonald's. They kept it operating with no funds. And I can get really into that because it's so cool what they're doing. They're still learning from this spacecraft that's 45 years old. And past Saturn, we can go to the next slide. And then you've got the techies down there that keep that antenna going. Yeah, they probably have to do it at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got a chance to sit at the original mission control desk. That was really, really cool. Go to the next slide. Now, let's not get hung up on the labels. Autism is this big spectrum. And the problem with autism is they keep changing the diagnosis. Originally, maybe 30 years ago or so, you had to have speech delay to be labeled autistic. And then they added Asperger's syndrome, where you all the time, and they find out they're autistic when the kids get diagnosed. That just happens all the time. And sometimes adults later in life getting diagnosed helps them with their relationships. But I'm concerned that too many fully verbal, smart kids on the spectrum get so hung up on the label, the parents get hung up on the label, that the kid's not learning basic skills like shopping, learning how to save money, doing laundry, just very, very basic things. Another big problem I'm seeing is not making the transition into the world of work. Work skills are not the same skills. We'll show another slide, all the cool stuff I got to go do there, like go up on the roof and I wasn't supposed to. That was really cool. All right, let's just get back to the getting important stuff in autism. Let's talk about some basic issues here. Sudden surprises scare. Okay, let's say a child's going to go to a new school. We'll try to visit it before they go there, or look at the website. The other thing that's difficult for a lot of individuals with autism is multi-stimulating two senses at the same time. The title of the paper is Environmental Enrichment and Effective Treatment for Autism. Now, let's say we have a nonverbal older child or adult and problems with maybe destructive behavior or hitting. The first thing with somebody who cannot speak is give them a way to communicate. Not being able to communicate is totally frustrating. Also, you have to rule out, do they have a painful medical problem that they can't tell you about? That's the first thing you need to make sure they don't have acid reflux. I had acid reflux last night because I ate some hot sauce I wish I hadn't eaten. And my stomach was hurting last night. But the sensory overload, if they have a meltdown or outburst in a busy, noisy store, that is probably sensory overload. But we've also got to give them a way to communicate. That is just super, super important. There's a next slide just shows that sensory symptoms are part of the neurobiology of autism. Now, when I was a little kid, they tested me for two things, deafness and epilepsy. Now, I could pass the deafness test, but the problem is my ability to hear auditory details impaired. Like if the grown-ups talk fast, it was when adults talked fast, like blah, 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 blah. That's what it sounded like. Because I didn't hear the hard consonant sounds. Like if someone said the word cat, and they said it fast, I would hear ah. So my speech teacher would say cat, tuck. Or she'd hold up a cup and she'd say cup, fuck. And she'd switch back and forth between saying cup and cup, fuck. Because if people talked fast, then all I heard were the vowel sounds. Stretch out and enunciate the consonants. And sometimes hearing would kind of cut in and out like a bad mobile phone connection. There's kind of three ways that the brain can have a problem with language. Not hearing the auditory details. And then the next slide, I talk about echolalic children. And echolalic children, they have good speech and they will recite an entire movie script. But the problem is they don't know what the movie script means. That's the problem. So in Life Animated, what these parents did is this child had memorized the Disney movie, and they picked out phrases in the movie that could be used in real life. And then their son started to computer. I've got a very, very small, I'm an Intel 286. I mean, if you're a computer geek, that's the first chip. But I have huge memory. Attention shifting slowness. This is why you have to give the child time to respond. The next slide shows attention shifting slowness. It's an old Mommy Klin slide. And look at how the normal person's looking at the eyes. But the other more important thing in this slide is look at how many times the normal person looked back and forth compared to the autistic person who's trying to lip read. Tension shifting slowness. All right, now let's look at things where this could cause a problem at work. I want to see these kids get employed. And I want to avoid the jobs such as rapid multitasking at a McDonald's takeout window. That would be a very bad job. Another problem is I don't have any working memory. So if, let's say I have to shut down the cash register at night at the store, and there may be 5 or 6 steps, I need to write them down. I need to write the steps down like a pilot's checklist. Long yakety-yak strings of verbal information do not work with me. Let me make a pilot's checklist. Giving the child time to respond. When I was 5 years old, in school, we had a little assignment where we had to name the pictures that began with B as in beautiful. So I called the suitcase a bag, and the teacher marked it wrong. And she didn't give me time to explain that in our house there weren't suitcases, they were bags. And that was very, very frustrating. I don't have visual processing problems, but some individuals do. And vision might break up similar to a migraine headache. Or this next slide shows an image that's breaking up. Seeing probably wouldn't be a primary sense if that's the way things look like. And this may explain why a number of people that do not speak touch and smell things, because those senses provide accurate information. And we'll go on to the next slide that shows an escalator. Now, in your brain, you have the eyes that work like a camera, but then in the back of the brain, there's circuits that assemble the graphics file in shape, color, motion, and texture. And there's something wrong with those circuits. Print may jiggle on the page when you try to read. These kids are often terrified of escalators because they can't tell how to get on and off of it. So you have a child that hates an escalator. The chances are he has a visual processing problem. And the eye exam may be more or less normal. Project book right here. You see the light blue paper color right there. Try printing on the homework and the reading materials on maybe light tan paper, light gray paper, all these different colored papers. That sometimes really works. for some types of dyslexia. Just try different colored paper, try different colored backgrounds on your computer, on your laptop, or on the iPad. The next slide, I talk about lighting issues. And one of the big ones now is LED lights that flicker. And one of the ways that you can determine if LED lights are bad is take pictures of them in slow motion. So you want to wave like this, because when you play it back, you want to make sure it's playing back in slow motion. And you're going to find some flat screen TVs that flicker. Now, tablets do not flicker. Most laptops do not flicker. But there's going to be some flat screen TV computer monitors that are bad. And this does not affect all people with autism. But I'm going to say like 10 or 20% may have a problem with seeing flicker of LED lights or on TVs and computer monitors. So what do you do if you have that problem? You go buy a lamp and you find an LED light that does not flicker and you put it next to the desk. And you can buy cheap ones that don't flicker. But this is something that's a real problem. And when I get asked about designing a school or a home for people with autism, I want to make sure we have LED lights that do not flicker. I just learned from a technical specialist that if the TV flickers, it has to do with internet connection. But this kind of stuff needs to be fixed, and you can just test it with slow motion video. The next slide just talks about some more severe sensory issues. In noisy environments, I am not able to hear because of all the background noise. Cannot hear. And I also cannot follow very rapid chit-chat conversations. When people get very social, chit-chat, masking, some of that stuff is just too hard for me to do. But you can always do some business social. You know, shake hands with people. There are some individuals that need breaks. But sensory problems are really wonderful books for that have been written by non-speaking autistics. I really like How Can I Talk My Lips Don't Move by Tito. I had a chance to meet Tito, and he came into a library, and he was flapping and everything, and I wanted to see, I tested him with a really, really strange picture that he had never seen before, and it had an astronaut in a spacesuit riding a horse out in the desert. And I showed that to Tito, and he types really fast, Apollo 11 on a horse. Another good book is Carly Fleischman's, Arthur Fleischman's Carly's Voice. Then you've got The Reason I Jump, the sequel to The Reason I Jump. I like the sequel, it's a better book. And where there's a problem in autism is in kind of the inter-office communications. And what you tend to get is uneven skills. Like I'm really good at art and mechanical stuff. Somebody else might be really good at mathematical stuff. And we'll just show some more pretty brain scans. Next slide shows, oh, that's my skull. Let's show the next slide. That's the microbiome. You see the little tiny hairs there? Those are axon tails. And they form great big inter-office communication cables between different parts of the brain. And then I can show you a slide without my ugly skull. And the connectome's much prettier when it's by itself. The next slide shows the circuit in the brain for speak what you see. Now there's the normal control right there, and I'll show you mine. Next slide. That's mine, speak what you see. And I have all these extra branches for visual thinking, but I have less fibers for speech. So that might explain why I had trouble getting my speech out. But when I had speech therapy, it increases the bandwidth on the fibers that are still left. The next slide just shows that. But this is where the therapy made a difference, because I had trouble getting my speech out. Let's go to the next slide. Now, for speak what I hear, I am definitely not an auditory person. I am definitely a visual person. And we'll go on to the next slide, and I want to talk about the importance of developing strengths. That's an artwork I did when I was about 6 or 7 years old. Mother always encouraged my ability in art. It's a picture of a wooden dock or deck that was by the beach. And she always encouraged patterns and abstractions. I discussed 3 different kinds of thinking that you can have in autism. Most people are mixtures of the different kinds of thinking. But in autism, you might get an extreme object visualizer. That's me. And the HBO movie shows how I think. My kind of mind's good at art, mechanical things, photography, working with animals, absolutely terrible in mathematics. And then the next kind of mind is the visual, spatial, mathematical mind. And the mathematical mind thinks in patterns. And then you have people that think in words. And it's important to, kind of know how the child thinks. That just shows eclipse shadows on where the eclipse, the trees made little tiny eclipses like pinhole camera. That happened on our campus. We really liked that. The next slide shows a recreation of one of my projects in the HBO movie. I thought that was just so cool. I really, really liked that. The next slide shows starting on my very first project. Now, I had some good mentors in the construction industry. On my first project, the Swift plant in 1974, I criticized some welding, and I said it looked like a bird had poo-pooed on it, and that's pretty rude. And the plant engineer pulled me into his office in private and said, I had to apologize for that rude kind of talk. He told me what I should do. And then another person that helped me was a small contractor, steel and concrete work contractor, who had seen my drawings and seeked me out. And for 10 years, we built projects together. And so those are on a construction site, some of my early projects. And some of the most fun stuff I ever did was working in construction. And I worked with a lot of people that were probably dyslexic, ADHD, or autistic. Some of these people owned big companies where they made mechanical equipment. They had lots of patents. I really put the emphasis on the career. This is what's made life happy for me, is having a fulfilling career. Next slide just shows some of my drawings. And when I showed people my drawings, they were impressed. That's how I sold jobs. Okay, let's work on what are we going to do about job interviews. Well, a job interview for me was lay the drawings on the table and show off the drawings. That's what I did. And they look at my drawings and go, well, in fact, actually today, now that everything's computerized drawings, I'm seeing some very bad drawings. And now the next drawing shows a dipping vat system. And you can see on the concrete work, I have all the reinforcing rods drawn in there. 4 years ago, I got a really horrible set of drawings that engineering firm had done on a computer, and they hadn't drawn in the reinforcing rods. I marked them all in pencil, and I said, you go back to that engineering firm and get it done right. This is a piece of equipment I developed for the meat industry called...
Similar toys, and they have similar visual preference. Is there
now,
any
does your son speak?
He is speaking, but he is not like having any big vocabulary, so he has very short vocabulary and has sensory issues.
Does he have a decent way to communicate? Even something out like one of these computerized things that will speak, or a picture board or something for him to communicate with?
No, we never use like visual pictures like PECs. We never use those. So we encouraging him to use more spontaneous speech, and the speech therapist, the ABA therapist, all of them, what they recommend, we follow that.
Well, if he can learn to speak, then you don't need to use PECs. But if you have a child that has like 3-word vocabulary and is 8 years old, we need to give him another way to communicate more easily. And that, I can remember the frustration when I couldn't communicate. And I remember that, I showed you that picture of the bicycle in the suitcase. And it was so frustrating when the teacher didn't give me time to explain that in our house suitcases were bags. And I didn't understand the concept of the letter B, the sound of the letter B. But there's a point where they need to get a better way to communicate. Yeah. Some kids can use sign language. Some kids there's various programs you can get for tablets.
Yeah, the thing is, he started talking just before he gets 6. So it's really delayed. So that's why...
But is he starting to talk? Are you getting more and more language?
Yes, yes, and
Okay.
more clarity. Like it takes time, like it's a step by step. But we have him from severe autism. Now he is in between low and moderate autism.
Okay,
So,
well,
the
that's
spectrum.
good. If you're getting progress, parents always ask me about different programs. I said the most important thing is you're getting progress.
Yes.
Now, if you're getting progress right now, then you're doing the right thing.
Yes, the only problem I'm struggling is his memory and his sensory problems. That kind of restrict him to learn more and focus on task and academics, and he's better in maths. As you said, there are a few types of visual learners. He is more into maths and numbers rather than alphabets and
Well,
reading.
then, you see, because I said there's a visual kind of autism, that's me,
Yeah.
but there's also a mathematical. There are kids that are very mathematical.
He is
They think
visual
it's
in
math.
maths, but he's not very visual in, he's not into reading that much, but he's better in maths, like counting and numbers. He's really good.
Well,
with
that's
numbers.
good. Then maybe you can move them ahead in numbers. How is he at things like getting dressed, bathing, these kinds of things?
He is very independent. Wherever I go,
Worse. We need to be getting him out and doing things. No, but television does not cause autism.
Thank you.